Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices is made possible in part by CIBC.
Good evening y bienvenidos to Chicago Tonight Latino Voices. I'm Araceli Gomez Aldana, host and reporter with WBEZ. Thank you for spending part of your weekend with us. On the show tonight, the Biden administration struggles to contain a wave of migrants at the border. We'll take a look at the president's proposed immigration legislation. A new law could effectively end the payday loan industry in Illinois, but could it have unintended consequences?
It's very natural for us. These are flavors that we grew up with.
And how a Chicago bakery braids Mexican flavors into traditional Jewish pastries. First off tonight, from his early days in office, immigration reform has been at the top of President Joe Biden's agenda. It's a priority that was reflected in some of his earliest executive orders overturning Trump-era immigration policies. And now, the Biden administration is struggling to manage a new cycle of migrants at the U.S.-Mexico border, as it's also looking to Congress to pass sweeping immigration legislation. Here's White House Secretary Jen Psaki talking about the administration's immediate response to the border surge.
What we're working to do is put in place steps and actions to help address the situation at the border, including, of course, expediting processing and opening up additional shelters.
Joining us to talk about Biden's immigration policy are Republican strategist Jesus Solorio Jr. and Oscar Chacon, Executive Director of the Alianza Americas, a nonprofit network of immigrant-serving organizations. Thank you for being with us today.
Nice to be here.
Oscar, let's start with you. How would you characterize the present situation at the U.S.-Mexico border?
Well, it's definitely, source of news. A lot of people are arriving there, including children. This is not really so unexpected. For the first 5 months of the year, almost every year, we have an increase. And when you take into account the pandemic year that we had behind us, these numbers are not at all surprising. I do believe that the media is very seduced with the idea that there is a crisis. In reality, I don't believe there is a crisis. I don't believe something like this can put a country like the US in crisis. And so I believe that we have a lot of work to do in order to ensure that we provide adequate support to people seeking safe haven and seeking asylum in the US.
From what you can see there, is it a surge?
Well, not really, because again, if you take into account what happened in 2020, there were tons of people that were stuck in Mexico and a lot of people who could not leave their own countries, which would have normally done so, but the pandemic just didn't allow it. So in my view, what we are seeing is simply similar to what happened if you actually close artificially a river. The river continues to flow. And the moment that you remove that particular stoppage, you are going to have a lot more people, and that's what we are seeing at the border. Where there is really a crisis, if I have to speak of a crisis, is what's going on in Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador.
And we'll get that in a minute. We'll get to that. Jesus, the Biden administration is proposing increasing the number of admissions across a variety of categories. What, in your view, would be the drawbacks of these increases?
Look, it's clear that we have a crisis at the border. And the hasty decisions that the Biden-Harris administration have made over the first couple of weeks that they've been in power has exacerbated the already increase in surge of migrants, individuals taking the treacherous road. Even his own Secretary Mayorkas has said that this is the worst that he's seen in over 20 years. And so what we need to do to address the situation is reinforce and enforce our immigration laws. Right now, candidate Biden promised individuals that they could come to our country illegally and through the asylum process. And what we're seeing is that there was already a backlog of asylum requests during the Obama-Trump administration. And now, again, it's being exacerbated by the surge that we're seeing at the border.
Oscar, what do you think about increasing some of these categories?
I think it's the right thing to do if you really want to handle what's going on in a rational and humane way. You know, we need to get above the fray and really take a look at what has been the impact of immigration altogether, including people who arrived to this country without authorization. The vast impact of that migration has been positive for the country: economic growth, employment, renewal of our society capacity to keep paying social security benefits. So we need to actually look at the facts, I mean, and get above, again, the fray, which tends to be so highly politicized when it comes to these matters.
And when it comes to a group of people who are in limbo, Jesus, what do you think about the DACA recipients? Should they be offered a path to citizenship?
Look, before we talk about DACA, we need to start enforcing our laws. We have a crisis at the border. And again, the Biden administration is exacerbating those efforts. He hastily signed executive orders rescinding a lot of the programs, a lot of the executive orders that were helping immigration officials expedite asylum requests, for example. And so what we need to do is first enforce our laws and ensure that people that want to come here can do it legally. What we're seeing, again, we are seeing a surge. We're seeing between 5,000 to 7,000 people on a daily basis trying to come into our country illegally. And again, these are numbers from President Biden's own Secretary Mayorkas. We have a crisis. We need to address that crisis, and we need to take immediate action.
Do you want to respond about the DACA recipients?
Like I said, we first need to, the House Democrats and House Republicans have had opportunities to address DACA specifically. We saw that when Speaker Pelosi took over the gavel, she wasn't willing to work with President Trump to ensure that we help these DACA recipients get through the process. Instead, she's using them as political pawns. And I'm afraid that we're going to see that same response now with the Biden administration. If they wanted to fix this problem, they would have fixed it a long time ago. And there's no effort, and there hasn't been any genuine effort from Democrats in Congress.
Oscar, to get back to Central America, do you think Biden's proposed legislation will do anything to address the root causes of migration from Central American countries?
Well, before I do so, let me just respond quickly to the argument about law enforcement. I happen to believe in law enforcement, but really saying that we should enforce existing laws right now would be similar to people saying that we should enforce Jim Crow laws or, frankly, slavery. Because the law that we now have in place, enacted in 1996, was crafted by white supremacists, and we should not be implementing that kind of law because that's detrimental to the nation. I surely believe, going back to your question, that if President Biden really tackles the very wide range of issues that are causing so many people to flee their countries, we should be able to strike a very decent, very humane balance to migration, which in the end, we actually are going to need more of, not less of, if you take into account the larger demographic dynamics of the country now.
Jesus, what do you think? Does the U.S. have an obligation to help improve the conditions in Central American countries?
Well, first, I think that it's an intellectually lazy argument to say that enforcing our laws is white supremacy. Look, Senator Biden and a lot of the Democrats voted for this legislation, and now they're in power, they're in the White House. So it's intellectually lazy to say that enforcing our laws is white supremacy. Second, we've been throwing billions of dollars to Latin American countries. The problem is not going to get resolved by throwing more money. What needs to happen is that citizens need to be empowered so that they can change their laws and make their country a more respectable country. What we're seeing is crime. What we're seeing is corruption within government. We're not going to be able to solve that problem by throwing more money into these Latin American countries. And look, the people making the treacherous road to our southern border do not want to leave their countries. They're doing it because of desperation. And so we need to empower these individuals to fix their own countries. And what we need to do here is enforce our laws to ensure that there is a way for legal immigration. We have to decipher first between legal and illegal immigration.
Oscar,
illegal immigration hurts our communities.
We have just a few seconds. Oscar, do you want to respond?
Very quickly, I mean, I think that if we had not been supporting people like the current president in Honduras, Juan Orlando Hernandez, somebody who is corrupt and actually charged as a narco trafficker, then situation will be different in these countries. But yeah, we do have a responsibility. And let me say clearly, there is nothing lazy about questioning racist laws. We must change laws before we can really speak firmly about enforcing them in a way that make us all proud.
All right, that's all the time we have today. Thank you to Jesus Ororio Jr. and Oscar Chacon for joining us.
Thank you.
Imagine taking out a short-term loan, making payments on it, and then discovering that you owe 4 or 5 times the original amount. It's a reality many lower-income Illinoisans face who are caught up in a cycle of predatory lending. Now, legislation the governor has signed could shut down the payday lending industry in Illinois, but payday proponents say that could lead to a host of bigger problems. Chicago Tonight's Paris Schutz reports.
It is a very big, scary number, but when you're desperate, you don't see it.
Keisha Warren needed a short-term cash infusion of $1,250 to make payroll costs for her small janitorial services company. So in 2019, she took out an auto title loan. That's a short-term loan that uses the borrower's vehicle as collateral. She says she was shut off from more traditional bank loans.
It's the fact that no one wants to lend to a person that has over $100,000 in student loans. So it was very difficult for me to get a regular loan.
The loan came with a yearly interest rate of 197%. That ballooned her initial $1,250 to a total payment of $3,400 that she paid off early last week. It's a story that plays out constantly in Black and Latino communities. Southside State Senator Jacqueline Collins co-sponsored the Illinois Predatory Lending Prevention Act, which would cap annual interest rates on short-term loans at 36%.
Anything above 36% is predatory and usury. And so we know that high-cost payday loans and auto loans have stripped communities of billions and billions of dollars, primarily the Black and brown communities in the state of Illinois.
The bill would impact payday loans, normally a 2-week loan where the money is taken from the borrower's next paycheck. It would also impact auto title loans and other short-term lending products.
Do people get in trouble with loans? Sure. I mean, anybody does.
Steve Brubaker, who lobbies state government on behalf of the Illinois Small Loan Association, says the 36% ceiling rate in the bill will effectively put most payday and auto title loan stores out of business while cutting off a lifeline for borrowers with poor credit.
We're closing these stores, we're firing the people, we're not providing the customers with any options, and we're taking $1 billion out of the marketplace, which was used to fix your car, buy a new refrigerator, spend it on kids' clothes for school.
The average APR for an auto title loan in Illinois is 197%. The average payday loan rate is 297%. But Brubaker says the numbers are misleading. When measuring the typical 2-week length of the loan, it comes out to about $15 on the 100.
When they see that giant number, they misunderstand really what the customer has to pay back. The average loan amount for a payday loan in 2019 was $340. Mm-hmm. And the average fee amount that was charged was $52.
What's misleading is that it's a short-term loan, because what happens is folks have to borrow over and over to pay back the previous loan.
Brent Adams is vice president at the Woodstock Institute, a nonprofit that advocates on behalf of low-income communities and communities of color. He says the payday lending industry relies on hooking borrowers into a never-ending cycle of debt with hidden rollover fees.
So what the lender will do is when the bill comes due, they will offer them an option that allows them to roll over the loan, refinance the loan, take out a different loan.
The next Friday came around, I owed exactly what I borrowed, and it was crazy, and I made a double payment, and it was very upsetting, but it's just like I kept digging a hole in the hole, and I couldn't find a way out of it.
Governor Pritzker has signed the legislation into law, but the issue might not end there. Opponents of the payday lending industry say they're worried about a series of bills circulating in the Illinois General Assembly right now that they say would gut some of the protections. Illinois Senate Republican leader Sue Rezin is a sponsor of one of the bills, which she says would allow mainstream lenders to issue auto loans. In a statement, Rezin said, quote, "My bill strikes a balance between protecting Illinois consumers and ensuring safe access to automobile credit. Under this legislation, interest rate caps are still in place to protect consumers from predatory lenders." For Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices, this is Paris Schutz.
The legislation Governor Pritzker signed had support from organizations around the state, including the Resurrection Project here in Chicago. That's a nonprofit that works on financial health, affordable housing, and immigration issues. Joining us is Lisette Carretero, Financial Wellness Manager for the Resurrection Project. Hello, Lisette.
Hi, Araceli.
And we heard in Paris's story about people getting caught in cycles of debt. Why is this something that affects communities of color?
Yeah, definitely. I think that especially, when we're trying to address issues like the racial wealth gap, when we have families that really do, search for these products because they are a immediate relief option, but without really understanding the long-term potential effects that will put them in a situation where it will drive them into a cycle, a never-ending cycle of being able to remove themselves from being able to pay these debts off, essentially, because it's a one-time thing. But essentially, most of the families that actually do go into payday loans, title loans, are families that are making less than $30,000 on an annual income. And so these are lifelines, right? But I think that part of what needs to be further, understood is really the understanding of the actual long-term payment that is going to be made.
As you work with people in the community, is language a barrier when it comes to taking out some of these loans?
Absolutely. I think, again, when it comes to marketing and specifically in communities of color, you'll see a payday loan very more accessible and easily in more of these neighborhoods. And so, as families look for options, they see the big signs of quick cash, fast money. And it's really an outlet that when, you think of trying to relieve your situations, that automatically comes into mind. But language is a barrier that we do see because we don't understand the contracts that we're signing. We don't really understand the terminology that it's involved with, these types of products.
If payday loans and other high-interest institutions close up shop, our community groups like yourself and community banks and nonprofit lenders, are they able to pick up the slack? Do they have enough resources?
Yes, definitely. As housing counseling services that we provide, our job really is to continue to work with partnerships with community banks, credit unions, really creative lending that's available at a very low cost, zero interest loans, products that we partner with that are essential, that we know that our families really need, and can provide additional educational workshops so that they understand how to budget and how credit works and how to reestablish your credit. And that's really a lot of the driving resources that we drive within the organization to assure that households have access to these resources and understand that there are other available options. And essentially these services that we provide are free. And so I think that is really what we strive to provide, that families understand that there are resources that are available to help you so that you can restructure and organize your financial health, because really it is about making sure you do have emergency savings, a plan. And we understand that with this pandemic, that's where a lot of families fell into desperation and the trap because of needing that lifeline to feed your children, to be able to pay your bills and pay your rent, where we know a lot of these utilizations of these loans were utilized for.
And very quickly, Lisette, what are some of the other things that you hope that the governor passes as protections for community members?
I think really it's protections as far as being able to relieve families within their credit, to really reestablish if they go into collections, how can we work towards banks and institutions to be more flexible with their guidelines and giving families a second chance to go from unbanked to banked, underbanked to a better banking product.
Thank you, Lisette. That's all the time we have. Lisette Carretero from the Resurrection Project.
Thank you.
Up next, we visit a Chicago bakery that's blending Mexican flavors into traditional Jewish pastries. Tomorrow, the sun will set on this year's Passover, an 8-day-long Jewish holiday commemorating the biblical story of Exodus. And among those celebrating right now is a robust community of Mexican Jews who have created a unique food culture, bringing together the best traditions of both communities. Now, 2 Mexican City natives have brought their versions to those flavors to Chicago. Producer Erica Gunderson has the story.
These are flavors that we grew up with. So we're just thinking about desserts that our grandmothers made or mothers made.
Flourless chocolate cake is a familiar dessert for many Jewish Chicagoans during Passover, when only unleavened bread is allowed on the table. But the flavors of Masa Madre's chocolate cake might not be quite so familiar. The glossy ganache topping their cake features the spices of Mexican café de olla, a twist that comes from the baker's unique blend of cultures. It's a twist they add to the other traditional Jewish pastries they offer as well.
I come from a community in Mexico which is Sephardic, so it's Middle Eastern, so pistachios, cardamom, all of those flavors. But we also have, the tres leches. Those are flavors that are very Mexican, that are also from our community. Challah is a bread that is braided. It's a bread that's typically made on Fridays for Shabbat, for Jewish day of rest. Babka is dough that is enriched. It has a lot of egg yolks and oil, and we fill it with different fillings that we actually infuse with our Mexican flavors.
The bakers behind the babka are Elena Vasquez Felgueres and Tamar Fasha Unikel. They met a decade ago in their native Mexico City while studying fashion design. Vasquez Felgueres moved to Chicago in 2016 so her wife could study at the School of the Art Institute. Fasha Unikel arrived 2 years later so her husband could complete his master's at the University of Chicago. The reunion gave rise to a fledgling business.
One day we were having dinner at her house and we were thinking how Chicago needed more bread, more fresh bread.
The pair began selling homemade sourdough loaves at farmers markets, but soon switched to confections combining Mexican and Jewish traditions.
There's about 40,000 Jews in Mexico City, so it's quite a large community and it's very tight. So this mix of flavors, I feel like it's happening a lot in Mexico City especially.
I think a lot of people don't know that this is like a mix of culture that exists, so they're surprised.
Before long, demand had outgrown what their home ovens could produce.
So we were baking out of our very, very small kitchens at home, and it was taking a lot of time to make.
As the holler for their challah grew, so did Masa Madre. Last October, they moved their baking to the Hatchery, a food incubator on Chicago's west side.
Each year it gets more busy, which is very good.
Since their sales were already conducted entirely online, the pandemic hasn't slowed them down.
After everyone shifted towards being online, people started getting more used to the idea of pre-ordering and picking up and all of that. So it was easy for us to transition and to just flow with it.
And they say that sharing the flavors of home with Chicago has made Chicago feel more like home for them, too.
I think it was hard to find something that could connect us to the people here. And after we started making bread and sharing it with everyone, we've met so many people through this business. Other women, other people just trying to make small businesses and share their stories.
Having this business has really like opened a space for us here in Chicago and made a community around us.
For Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices, this is Erica Gunderson.
It's too late to get that flourless chocolate cake for tomorrow's Seder, but Masa Madre offers their babka and challah year-round, as well as other seasonal treats, and you can find more information on our website. And that's our show for this Saturday night. Be sure to check out WTTW.com/news for the latest from WTTW News. And join Angel Ito tomorrow night for Chicago Tonight Black Voices. New Black leaders of local arts organizations weigh in on the future of Chicago's stages. And remembering Loyola's 1963 championship team and the adversity they faced. And you can catch me hosting weekend editions Saturday and Sunday, as well as my reporting during the week on 91.5 WBEZ. Next week, here on Latino Voices, Univision's Alex Hernandez will be in the host chair. Now, from all of us at Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices, I'm Araceli Gomez Aldana, and thank you for sharing part of your weekend with us. Stay healthy and safe. Buenas noches.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that is proud of its partners named Illinois leading lawyers by the Law Bulletin Publishing Company of Chicago.